Hot topics from the soul. Yeah. Hot topics from the soul. Yeah. Hot topics from the soul. Reaching all minds, turning knowledge into gold. Yeah. Hot topics from the soul.
Hello and welcome to Hot Topics from the Soul. I'm your host, Dr. Valerie Parker Hagan, and I have my co-host along with me.
Hey, Dr. J.R. Thicklin, and I'm just so excited to be here on this first Tuesday in the month of September. We're in a new month and things are happening all around us.
Oh my goodness, you're right. It is the first Tuesday. I have been on skates for the last couple of days, so my days are all running together, but I'm so excited to be here so that we can talk about contentment, resentment, or entanglement. We're getting back to relationship talks. We've been covering and talking about voting and the elections, etc. And, there's so many people going through situations and circumstances in their relationship. And unfortunately, Dr. J, it's more and more people finding it necessary for them to take their lives than to try and live out the relationship as it relates to marriage and stuff. They're taking their lives, they're taking the spouse's lives and taking the children's lives. So the title about contentment, resentment, and entanglement, I think individuals really need to define their relationship, define their status. And guess what? If it's not working out, ending it by death is not the solution.
No, when it said until death do us part, it wasn't talking about taking one another's life or taking someone's life, but it goes back to understanding what is your vision of a relationship? What does that look like? And then understanding the fact relationship is not a one size fit all, neither is a one instance that fits all. It is something that is always going to evolve or should evolve, and it should grow. And so one of the things that happen is when we find these relationships, people become confused because they're not settled in on what they envision as a relationship. If you hear the word contentment, some people take that word contentment to mean they confuse the word contentment with being, if you would, complacent. Mm-hmm. Two different words altogether. Contentment meaning that I am grateful, I'm satisfied with what we have. I'm happy and I'm thankful for what we have. I'm not outside of our scope. I'm not overindulging. I'm not caught up in the stars about having things. I'm content. We're good. And that's a good way to put it. When we confuse contentment for complacency oftentimes is when the relationship has reached a place of stagnation. It's not growing. There's no nurturing going on. There's no sense of, in other words, it's like the dream wheel have just slowed down and you're not doing anything. But even inside of being, if you would, even inside of complacency, it does not or should not reach the level where one wants to harm themselves or one wants to harm the other individual, because relationships are that relationship, the ability to relate to one another. And it is true. We grow. In relationship, people grow. Individually, we grow. You think about it. You and your siblings can start off in the same house, attend the same schools, do the same thing. But at some point, when you make certain decisions, you take different paths. Maybe one decided to go off to college, someone off to tech school. Maybe someone decided they want to go to medical school. They grew. What they accomplished, what changed their life was the decisions they made. So it is with a relationship. That's why when we start talking about relationship, and if your relationship goal is marriage, then you have to understand something, that marriage is not the finish line. Right. It's the beginning. If your relationship is one to say, okay, we're going to make a life together, then guess what? Just moving in together is not the finish line. You got to understand the fact things should evolve. People evolve. You have to give each other space to evolve. Talk about that evolution. Learn to be content. Many people Their enemy to their contentment is oftentimes their desire of to be like other people, envying other people, becoming jealous of other people, and therefore they end up turning on each other many times because we're not like them. Why can't you be more like? Why can't you be more like? And
Well,
we
that brings us into resentment. They start resenting the
Mhm,
relationship, and it becomes bitter because of the fact that they feel that they missed out on an opportunity. And a lot of times, I know women do this a lot. If they may not be totally into a person,
mhm,
a man, but what they will do is, if that man is showing affection and showing that they care about their welfare, their being, and cater to them,
mhm.
then and that person says, "You want to get married? I want to marry you. I love you." They're not totally in, but they be like, "Okay, all right," but they're not totally in. And then when they're in this relationship, in this marriage where it's a bond now, they feel trapped because they are unfulfilled, because they leaped at the first thing that came, because, oh, I'm at this certain age now, so I don't think I'm going to be able to meet anybody else. I don't think I'll ever get married. Oh, my all my friends are married. Oh, my friends are engaged. They're going on couples trips, and they're doing all this, and that's not happening with me. But if I get married, then I could join the party. I could go on trips with them. And then they go on trips, and then they start looking at the relationships of their friends and seeing the dynamics of how they're functioning and how they're working. And then they're like, that's not what I have. And then they feel resentment. But the resentment is because they chose to put themselves in a situation because it was convenient.
Yeah, and those are decisions we have to make beforehand. First of all, being authentic with ourselves, being authentic. Father time or mother time should not be the thing that necessarily forces you into a relationship, especially a commitment of that magnitude. What we have to understand is what are the things that we can live with? What are the things that we can live without? What are the things that I must have? What are my non-negotiables? What are those things that I know that I was meant to be, that I deserve? And don't back away from what you deserve. You deserve to be loved. You deserve to be cherished. You deserve to be nurtured. You deserve to be covered. You deserve those things there. On the other end, don't get it twisted. Sometimes people become resentful because of the fact they have a preference. Here's my preference. And they will stick to that preference and oftentimes get frustrated because that preference may be a fantasy, a fairy tale. But when they evolve, they may come to the conclusion that that may be my preference, but is that really my purpose? Does that
Mm.
really bring me fulfillment? Does that really, because when we look at things from a superficial, shallow position, we get caught up with those things. We look and say, oh, wow, they're going on trips. They're doing all those things. That doesn't mean they're happy. It doesn't mean they're, and then what makes one couple happy does not necessarily make the other couple happy. So one has to be able to be true to themselves. They must be true to each other. You must be able to be very vulnerable and very transparent with one another. Here's my thought. This is what's really going on with me. This is how I feel about that. This is how this affects me. Be honest with each other. Don't mislead the other person. The other person is doing all they can to try to fulfill, to make you happy. And I know people are going to say, well, you don't get a relationship for someone to make you happy. Well, you definitely don't get in one for someone to make you miserable. Take
That is absolutely right.
you know,
And
and
that's why we go into the entanglement part, because of the fact that they start doing, they get in these relationships that are not supposed to be joined together. And then they start creeping, as you put it. They'll start looking other ways for satisfaction. And then they get entangled with relationships that they shouldn't be entangled with because they're not fulfilled in the one they're in. And it becomes to be a snowball effect. And it's not only toxic to you, but it will be toxic to that other family that you're engaged in. And then it'll be toxic for your spouse, because he may be, or she may be thinking, I'm in a good space. My husband or wife loves me and I'm in a good space. Everything is good. And they may be thinking everything is good because, we know how to be chameleons.
Yeah.
We know how to fake it and fake it and fake it and fake it. And then when the reality comes where you have to come face to face with that man in the mirror and you don't like what you see, but you're so entangled.
And you're right. It happens a lot of different ways because when we start talking about entanglement, entanglement could also happen when individuals don't understand the balance between their own individuality and becoming who they need to with their spouse. See, when you and I become overly dependent, if you would, when we become overly dependent on each other emotionally, mentally, or even financially and physically, it can lead to an unhealthy dynamic. And so what happens is
Very
that,
unhappy.
yeah. So now you lead to this dynamic where now you're expecting more out of this person than this person may be able to even bear, then they can even manifest. You become overly independent, overly dependent. And what happens is inside of that, you begin also lose your individuality and you begin to look for this person to give you your identity. No, you have to maintain as much as the togetherness is there. Your individuality is what brought you together. Believe it or not, there's something about you that is different from me. There's something about me that is different from you. There are things that you do, but when we get so caught up inside of those things, there we can get entangled, and then we start into those unhealthy boundaries, those unhealthy things, which leads to us now when I can no longer find it in you. I search all over and I find it somewhere else. And now I'm entangled in something that I shouldn't be. But the
But
reality is
that's
that,
a false sense of security because that
yes,
person that you're entangled with will never really be yours. And even if you divorce your spouse that you're with, that person won't even bother with you because they like the convenience of the fact that you were already committed to somebody else so they could still be able to do what they want to do because they actually didn't want a relationship. They like the side piece. There's a lot of people that are content just being the side piece, but I want to be the only piece.
exactly, the main course, right?
That's
The
right.
only course. And
Side piece going on here. So, we have to expect more. We have to be more. You want to be addressed as a queen, you want to be addressed as a king, then you need to fulfill that role in being there, knowing that you're fearfully and wonderfully made and that you were created on purpose for a purpose and that you're comfortable in your own skin. Yeah, even if your teeth fall out, your hair start getting gray, you need to be comfortable with who you are.
well, that's important. And see, that goes back to the authenticity. We live in a day and time where we get our messages from so many different people. We get
Mm.
our messages from reality TV. We get our messages from celebrities. We get our messages from people. And to the fact that we don't know who we are because we're too busy trying to be someone else. So we don't know who we are. So we start living, if you would, vicariously through somebody else. And the person that we're with all of a sudden think that they're with the genuine person, the authentic person, and what they're with is an image. They're with an actor. And that act that you started with, you
It's
can't
a
carry on.
chameleon. That person is a chameleon. He's being or she's being who you want them to be at that moment and
Yeah,
at that time. And for a couple of hours, if you slip away, they'll be that person for you. And oh, you caught up and oh, you in love. I love the way he makes me feel. And oh, when I think about him, I get butterflies. But then when you need him,
yeah.
he's not to be found because he has his own relationship going on the side. I can't tell you how many women that I know have got caught up in side relationships. And then when the real deal was there and they got busted and then they lost it, how they crumbled.
Yeah, because emotions have to be nurtured. Emotions have to remain healthy. And the thing about it, being healthy emotionally is not always based upon what you possess outwardly. We have to do emotion. We must practice emotional wellness. We must practice becoming well and whole within ourselves. We have to ask ourselves the question: why does this matter to me? Why is it that this? Why does it that I'm so drawn to this? Do we put unrealistic expectations on ourselves? And do we put unrealistic expectations on our mates? This is important because at the end of the day, you can be in a relationship. Now, I love when I see people happy. I do. God bless you. I love it. I love it when I look and I see, friends of mine, they're celebrating 36 years and 44 years and those type things. And you're excited about that and you love it. But I also know that everybody who flashes a number up there doesn't mean that it's been 36 or 44 years of marital bliss. Believe me, there have had to be some compromise. There have had to be some sacrifice. There have had to be some learning and some growing and some maturity and allowing space for you to evolve because you've got to want to continue to evolve. Don't get it twisted. There is a place in every relationship for both your togetherness and your individuality. Seeing you grow, seeing you prosper, seeing you evolve, seeing you becoming the best version of yourself ought to be something that I want, and vice versa. When we get into these type of things that grows us into being very selfish, we can become very bitter. We can become resentful. And resentfulness happens because of the fact oftentimes we don't speak up. We allow things to fester. We don't deal with those things. We don't. We'll go to bed angry. That's a scripture that says to us that, be angry, but sin not, let not the sun go down on thy wrath. And oftentimes people let the sun go down on their wrath, rise up on their wrath, the moonlight on their wrath, and they don't deal with issues. And so what happens when we don't deal with it, it becomes what I call the compound effect. Things keep piling up. Things keep piling up. And the more they pile up, the less patience you have, and then like a fuse, boom. Now it could be one small thing that all of a sudden ignite that fuse and you just totally explode and everything around you is destroyed. You've been carrying that. That resentment has been building up. And then once it does explode, we have but one language. You. It's your fault. Your fault. Your fault. The reality is, guess what? If there's smoke, there eventually be fire. We've got to address it early on, and we got to be deliberate about that.
Well, a lot of times, Dr. J, when you're in a relationship with someone, sometimes, children come into the spectrum of that relationship. And what happens is you unexpectedly get pregnant. And then, because you got caught up and a child is in the midst, then you go ahead and get married. And then the aspirations of going to college or traveling the world and being able to get your own place and, just be an individual is taken away. And a lot of times it's taken away and then you enter from one situation into another. Then it's a contract that you enter into, which marriage is. It is an emotional contract between two hearts. So now you're thrown into a situation, new parents, new marriage, new home, and you got to figure life out. Well, that's over. You become overwhelmed and the resentment starts from there. And then you wonder why people are together 30, 40, 50 years and then divorce. And you'd be like, well, dang, you don't went that far. What happened? It's because they had grown apart for years, but there was no window to escape out of at the time. So they stay in that situation and they get resentful and angry and bitter. And before you know it, you're at each other's throats because of the fact that you're angry because you robbed me of my dreams. You stole from me my life. I dedicated my whole life. And then when you have these children that disrespect you, knowing the sacrifice that you made, it becomes a snowball effect.
It does, but I think, that goes back to really, once again, what is our view? And I don't like to use the word worldview, but I do like to say, what is it that we define as relationship? Because things are going to happen. Every decision will impact something later down the road, but we ought to be able to learn from the things that we have gone through. If we're going to do that. So guess what? It didn't go the way that I planned it. No, this is not the way I planned. Does that have to lead to resentment or does that lead to reroute? It is like getting to a destination. Sometimes we're traveling, that GPS is on, and you ever been driving, and sometime, depending on your GPS system, they know there's an accident up the road, or the roads are blocked, and
Detour.
they may reroute you, reroute. And sometime in life, situations that we face, even decisions that we've made ourselves, it will cause us to have to reroute in order to get to where we need to go. The thing about it, we got to be content with going with the reroute. We got to be content with it, and let's not grow bitter, because at some point or another we made those decisions.
Right.
We made those decisions.
Exactly.
So we
every
gotta
road, every decision, and every destination that we end up at, we made an appointment to be there. Our actions cause these things, but just because our actions cause the situation to fluster does not mean it is the end of what the purpose and the dream and the goals were for your life. And that person that you're with, if you've been there that time, there is space for what commitment and reintroducing yourself to the new version of yourselves, because that person has changed too.
Exactly.
That
We're all affected
it's
by it.
changed too. Yeah. So, you're on the same road driving, but you could be in different directions, but you can wind up in the same place, even with the detour.
Absolutely. And that's what's important to understand. When we get out of the mindset that, I gotta win, I gotta win, I gotta win. First of all, that's the wrong language. We have to win. What is our we formula? How do we enter this thing? Do we have a we mindset, or are we coming in knowing that we're very selfish? We're knowing that we're very selfish. We're very possessive. We're not people that compromise. We can't sit down and talk about things and stick to a decision there, because somehow or another we kind of revert back to this whole thing. It's about me. Well, I'm not going to let nobody just take advantage. Are we taking advantage of, or are we working towards something? There's nothing that ever happens without anything that involves two people will always require sacrifice to happen. It simply will. It will require sacrifice of your time, sacrifice of your presence, sometimes sacrifice of your talent and your money. It will require that. The reality is what are you willing to invest into it? What are you willing? Are we willing to see the outcome? The thing about it, too often we allow ourselves to get resentment because we're envying the wrong people. We're envying the wrong thing. Go through some things, because everybody, the only way I think that you really build, we say with time and comfort comes trust. With time and comfort comes trust. But let me say something to you. It's not just with time and comfort comes trust. With time and friction also teaches us a lot. Because until growth doesn't happen in comfort, growth happens inside of conflict. Growth happens. Think about it. When you go to the gym and you're working out, those muscles aren't just sitting there going, okay, this is so cute. No, you're stretching them. You're doing things to cause it to move out of its comfortable position. You have to stretch some things. Life will bring you opportunities. We can choose to accept those opportunities, or we can try to go around them. There are people that will face reality, and there are people that will escape reality. There are people that will own up and say, okay, bring on the next challenge. And there are other people that will look to run away from challenges. But you have to know what you're made of, and then be willing to be made. Be willing to evolve. Be willing to evolve. I will pray and hope that we're not the same people today that we were 10 years ago. Maturation should have happened. My favorite saying is that it's not enough to go through if we don't grow through. Some people, that's the problem with the toxicity in a relationship. You keep going through, but you never grow through. So listen, even in the worst situation we made, maybe it was a bad investment on money. Maybe it's a bad decision there. How do we grow through this? What lessons do we learn from this? What safeguards we now put in place as a result of what we went through? And let's not turn on each other. Let's turn to each other.
Well, you know what, Dr. J, one of my great aunt is being buried tomorrow, and her and Uncle Cephas, they've been married, I think, about 70 years.
Wow.
And it brings me in remembrance that, my grandparents, they were together from when they were teenagers, 14, 15 years old.
Wow.
And when one died, the other one died within months of the other one, because they were so tightly knitted together.
Yes.
And they were children. They had that pure simple. And now, did they have disappointments in agreement? Yes, but they had that simple, authentic love that the Bible talks about, loving thy neighbor as thyself. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Love has no boundaries. When you love someone, you are willing to sacrifice and give your life for them. Just like Christ did, he loved us so much that he gave. I think what's happening right now is so many people are so selfish and so self centered that they want everything to be about me, myself, and I, instead of really sharing that space, sharing your heart. Let's do this together. Let's work this out together. Let's walk together. Because, everybody wants to be loved. They want to be heard. They want to be appreciated. They want to be acknowledged. But, you give as you get. And I know more than anybody that it doesn't always work out like that, because I had someone that was very abusive, but I worked on it. I was tried. I gave it my all, and until it almost cost me my life. And I'm not telling people to stay in a situation that is physically abusive or mentally abusive, because like I said, there's a lot of people think they get so overwhelmed that they feel that the answer is to take their lives. But the problem with that is you'll leave one hell and go into another,
Absolutely.
because eternity is eternity. There is no escape out of the grave. So the thing is to start focusing on you, rebuilding you, and introduce yourself to you. Because a lot of times when you have children, you lose yourself. When you get married, you lose yourself because your desire is to please your spouse, to raise and nurture your children. So yes, you get lost. Yes, you get distracted, but you got to keep the main thing, and that is LOVE, love.
Dr. Val, as we look back over our lives, one of the exercises that we do sometime in group, we ask the question, what message would your older self tell your younger self right now?
Mm.
If a message that the older JR would tell the younger JR would be profound, inside of not only being patient, not only inside of being able to persevere, you know, what does it mean inside of understanding grace? Because every relationship will need grace. It will need grace. It'll need grace when you don't feel that the other person is up to par doing what they should do. It's going to need grace when you're not up to par doing what you should be doing. It's going to need grace inside of it, but grace in that room to grow, the grace in the room to appreciate one another. I do not, and neither should we ever pit our partners against perfect.
Mm.
We're pitting them against perfect. It's like we're there with our pen and we're ready to give a grade. Wow.
Grading that spouse.
Exactly. And that's not how we do things. It has got to allow room to grow. And you talk about oftentimes the interests of children. You're right. You know what happens? We do get caught up and wrapped up in raising our children, and we take great pride in raising our children, but oftentimes at the expense of the love relationship, at that expense. And the thing about it is that we have to keep all things in their place. And I think listen, we've definitely made that mistake, inside of it. Those my babies, we're going to take care of it. Yes, but at the end of the day, what picture, what roadmap, what example, what blueprint did we give them when it came to navigating the side of a relationship? Because the thing that happens, your kids will get old enough and they will, so long, bye-bye, they leave. It's called empty nest.
Mm-hmm.
When you're now there having to face each other, and then you realize you don't even know each other anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know who you become because you didn't take the time to continue to nurture that. That part is important. That part is very important. Learning to love each other, do things, simple things. Sometimes what happens is we become so envious of what we see in other people do, and we don't know what type of indebtedness
you don't know that rocky road they had to drive down to get to that destination in that
exactly.
point, which is like what we talked about. People want, they envision themselves as how what they imagine that person is living. That's why they
Mhm.
get caught up in the reality televisions and these TV shows and these movies, these Hallmark things, and thinks it should be that. And oh, my husband's coming through the door. There he goes again. Instead of saying, "Hi, honey, how are you? How was your day?" So,
Mhm.
we have to set the tone. We have to set the tone and be the message we want brought back to us.
It
If
is.
you give love, you'll get love back. And no, it doesn't always work that way. And it may never work that way. But there are options where you can get out of a situation, but be for certain that that is the road you want to take.
Yeah, and you do. You have to be certain if that's the road you want to take. Here's the words I've learned over the years through my if you would, unsuccessful marriages or relationship. Here's what I've learned. I've learned inside of looking at things that there's three very important words. Three very important words, and it doesn't even begin with L. It begins with C. Okay, we have to look at compatibility. Yes, we do. We have to not only look at compatibility, but we have to look at, if you would, capacity.
Mhm.
Capacity is such a big part of it. Does that person have the capacity to love? Is it within their wheelhouse, within their makeup, to be able to reciprocate back into me what I need or what I give out? So we talk about capacity. We're talking about, we talk about compatibility. And here's the thing that we often look at. Sometimes we say, okay, compatibility, capacity, but do we really have anything really in common at all
Mhm.
other than our skin color? Do we have anything in common? And being able to look at those things and be able to decipher through those things. Now, somebody said, why come he didn't say Christ? Well, that should be something that you have in common. That'll
Mhm.
be something that you have in common. And I think what happens so often that when we don't take the time and look at these things here, what is it that I really need? Sometimes we do get caught up. We don't understand our own purpose in this life. So when we don't understand our purpose in this life, we make decisions that oftentimes that has nothing to do with enhancing the purpose in which we're here. So be very careful that our preference doesn't get in the way of our purpose. Your preference could be A, B, C, D, and you get all of that, but it does nothing to fulfill your purpose whatsoever. And you still find yourself empty because of the fact, well, that was my preference. But after getting my preference, man, it didn't fulfill me. It didn't. It's almost like I checked off a box, but I did not hit that place of fulfillment. And the thing about it is this: it's something that you got to work towards. You got to work towards. And I know it's so easy to get frustrated. It gets even more frustrating when you don't have, I know the other C, when we don't have healthy communication. What's that word again? Communication. Yeah,
Communication.
communication, healthy communication. Not talking just to be heard, but
And not
talking
talking at a person.
exactly. Exactly. You
Just
know,
having a clear, clean conversation and discussing things. And you can be content in a
mhm,
relationship. In a relationship, you can be content in a marriage and
mhm,
still live your dreams.
absolutely.
You
Absolutely.
can still live your dreams and you can still walk in your purpose, whatever that purpose is. Because guess what? If your spouse loves you, then he will want the best for you.
Want to come
And he would
alongside and
want
see
to
it happen.
help you. He will help you evolve into what you need to do and where you need to be. There's that, just like with this show, Dr. J. I was okay being not on the air and doing, because I did Hot Topics from the Soul like 12 years straight
Right.
every week, and I got weary and I came off for a couple of years, and almost every week my husband would say to me, "When you going to start your show back? When you going to start the show back? How come you haven't started the show back?
Exactly.
Why haven't you started the show back?" He would just
Exactly.
go into these lines. So he was like, "Well, it seemed like you had a pretty good following. How hard would it be to build back up your following?" have you thought about other ways that you can bring it back? And then he was like, well, why don't you do people doing Facebook? Why don't you try that? I was like, well, I don't like people looking at me. And he
I
said,
remember though. I remember.
I said, I like people. I said, Blog Talk was great. They could hear me
Yes,
just like they hear on the radio station.
but they
And
didn't have to
then
see you,
he
right?
was like, well, things are changing. So I was content, but he wouldn't allow me to be content because he knew it was something that I did, and he knew it was something that brought value to other people. So he encouraged me to go back and
Absolutely,
do it again, because he said people are probably waiting and been looking to see what's going on with you.
absolutely,
So you need to go back on it. Then I said, Dr. J.
absolutely, right? Okay, you know,
So, you can be content and live out your purpose. And if you have someone that is willing and wants to see you fulfill and walk out, then it's even more, it is perfect then. So,
exactly. Dr. Val, one of the things that I think is so important, when we talk about contentment, resentment, and entanglement, is that, the word contentment is not a weak word. Some people tend to think it's a weak word. There's nothing about contentment that is weak. As a matter of fact, contentment itself can be a incredible strength. The ability to know how to roll with things, to roll with things. There are people who will find themselves in debt because of the fact they don't know how to be content. There are people that will find themselves, if you would, turning over everything in their house because they haven't learned how to be content. There are
mm,
individuals who will find themselves, if you would, alienating everybody who would love them because they have not learned how to be content. Being content is not this thing of being stuck in quicksand or stagnation. Being content is having emotional intelligence and maturity enough to recognize, listen, it may not happen right now, and it is not always necessary for it all to happen right now. I am growing inside of this. That's what happens in relationship. You grow together. No two people come together, oh, we're just perfect. No, you grow. You grow into each other. You learn each other.
you
You
have
learn.
the basics, you have the basic foundation to
Right.
grow, but
Exactly.
you've already established that when you became a couple.
Exactly. Exactly. And we got to be able to move beyond that. So contentment is important. The other part is this: don't build something that you are waiting to just fall apart. Because resentment, why does resentment happen? Once again, because there's been a lack of communication. We have not been honest enough with each other. We're not speaking to each other. In other words, I'd rather avoid you than to talk with you. I'd rather avoid you than to bring this up. I'd rather avoid you and then go back and really kind of ridicule you for not being this and not doing that. Resentment is a bad thing because resentment will eat away at you. Resentment will always cause you to look for the most negative thing about your situation. Resentment will always cause you to also blame the other individual. Resentment puts you on an island. It's
Mhm.
called woulda, coulda island. And that's what happened. People get on this island in the resentment. They keep rehearsing all their shortcomings. They rehearse all their failures. They rehearse all those delayed things. And sometimes I don't like calling things failures because sometimes things are just simply delayed. They're in the process. They're delayed. And so delayed doesn't mean denial. Delay doesn't mean that it won't happen, but understand there are certain things that you're not ready for yet, and you have to gain the emotional maturity to be able to walk through it together. And that's what maturity looks like. Growth looks like that. Growth means the fact we've learned. We made some very immature decisions. We made some bad decisions in our what? Immaturity, in our hastiness. And so people have to understand just because you're older doesn't mean that you're always wiser. Keep in mind that because sometimes what happened, the old adage says, with age comes wisdom.
Mhm.
But the reality, if we never take time to unpack things that we go through, if we never deal with, if you would, past traumas and issues, let me tell you something, age will come all by itself. No wisdom with it. It is coming totally unaccompanied because of the fact you never unpack, you never learn, you never really look for the solution because you were content with blaming the other person as being the culprit. And you never understood or never took the time to recognize, how did I play a part in this? How did I affect those decisions? What is it that I also contributed to it? And if you're not willing to do that, then I promise you, you'll never be content with no one. You're not even content with yourself. You will never be content with anything because the fact you will never stop and take ownership of some things that are going on in your own life. Take ownership. Are you selfish? Be honest with yourself. I am selfish. Be honest with yourself. Am I the person that have to have in my way, or can I coexist with someone? Mm-hmm. Can I coexist with someone?
Well, you said a lot right there, Dr. J. A lot of times we don't unpack before we get entangled with the relationship, and we bring that baggage into that relationship, and then we expect that person to be able to take whatever is thrown at them because this is the way I am. This is the way it's going to be. As you say, I'm not changing and I'm not deviating from nobody because this is me. This is me. I'm a queen, and what I say, go. Well, you're going to be by yourself because no strong man is going to take that when the word of God says that the man is supposed to be the covering, and he's not going to change his word just to accommodate you. So we have to get back in line with biblical principles of what is right. And so that we can be blessed, really, so that we can be blessed if we go back to the foundations of the way it's supposed to be, because this is what has happened is this country has become so distorted with so many things on so many different levels. And, the music, the television and all that, we live our lives vicariously through these images that we see, and they're ungodly images. Absolutely. So we need to come back to reality. Can you have a Hallmark love affair? Yeah, but you have to create it. Can you be Cinderella? Yeah, but you have to create it. You want somebody to love you wholly, then you need to be in a position of loving that person as well.
Here's a question, when I can recall the early years of premarital counseling, those things. One of the questions was, why do you want to be his wife? Why do you want to be her husband? And when you ask it that way, people are going, what do you mean, why? Because in many ways, they don't look at that. They just look at, I just think we ought to be together. But why? 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 Why are we in this? Are we in this because of the optics? We look good? Are we in it because of the fact we give this aura of being a power couple? Why are we in this? Are we in this because, hey, it's about time for me to have somebody on my arm? Wrong answers. Wrong answers. Because at the end of the day, what do I bring? See, what I bring is not always just finances alone. Do I bring peace? Do I bring stability? Do I bring enlightenment? Do I bring this part where I really minister to your spirit? Does my very presence help soothe you? Do you feel safe with me? Do I feel safe with you? Or do I always feel like I'm on a performance treadmill with you?
I was getting ready to say, am I comfortable in my own skin?
Exactly. And then even more so when we look at, a person who's, who's never at peace. You got to ask yourself the question, then what did I bring to them? What am I bringing? So it can't always be about just you. You have to consider the other person as well. And it's so easy to bail out. It's so easy to bail out. It's so easy to bail out and look for some type of emotional band-aid outside. The emotional band-aid outside. They smiled at you. They winked at you. They blew you a kiss. And you get caught up in that moment. That required no work. That required no effort. Didn't require anything. Our real challenge is I learned I don't.
That's right. Dr. J, we're out of time, but I want to let everyone know that you can go visit the website, jrthicklin.com, and he is available for speaking engagements, paid speaking engagements.
Absolutely.
And you can visit his website to support his foundation, Destiny by Choice. And Dr. J, you can talk a little about your nonprofit.
Absolutely. Destiny by Choice have been serving over 20 years, empowering lives, shaping destinies, those impacted by such things as domestic violence, the impact of fatherlessness, if you would, and all those social determinants that have come to rob us of our best life. And so inside of that, we give you tools and building blocks. How do we overcome? How do we relearn things that we should have learned? And how do we find ourselves, if you would, healed from the traumas that have robbed us of the best quality of life?
Amen. Thank you, Dr. J. And you can visit my website from thesoulafofawoman.com. And I encourage you to become a soul partner that is supporting either monthly or one-time fee love gift to support the Soul of a Woman Foundation, which serves domestic violence and children in single parent homes. We also contribute to higher education for those in single parent homes. So support Soul of a Woman Foundation, www.fromthesoulafofawoman.com. And please remember to subscribe to Hot Topics from the Soul. And this show has been a blessing and gave some nuggets for you. May not have a lot of nuggets for you, but if it has some nuggets that you can agree with, then you can share the show and subscribe. Thank you so much for tuning in to Hot Topics from the Soul. And may you have a great, powerful week until next week. Good night.
Good night.
Hot topics from the soul, reaching all minds, turning knowledge into gold. Yeah, hot topics from the soul.